How are you doing?
Good.
I am really grateful that you chose to come here even after lunch. Because the afternoon is a little bit more difficult, right? But I am grateful that you're here, and we're going to have an absolutely wonderful time learning together. Let me tell you just a little bit something personal about me, so that we can get closer together over the next hour and a half, right? I am originally from Venezuela, so that's the accent that you hear. Venezuela is the most northern country in South America. It's on the Caribbean, and I came to the United States at age 15. I had the brilliant idea, mostly because I was doing very poorly in math. I had the brilliant idea at that time that I wanted to be an exchange student and come to the US. I don't know where I got that idea. By now, I forgot where all that came from, but I managed to talk my parents into letting me do this. Not only letting me do this, but pay for it, which seems to, that's really an unusual move. So it happened, and this lovely family in Waco, Texas chose me. They chose me to have me as one of their own for a year, and I was registered as a sophomore in a high school in Waco, Texas. It was just outside of Waco. It was a small town called Hewitt. One of the things that happened to me that were really stressful, because I did not speak English at all. I have maybe heard hamburger and window and door and a couple other words, but when I said them, no one understood me. So it didn't really matter if I knew them or not. And I probably knew other words, but I had never really heard native English speakers say these words so that I could pronounce them right. So that was a hurdle. But this is the funny thing that happened to me. It was just within the first few days of school that they gave you your books. Whatever classes you were taking, they would give you these big fat books, and they handed you these covers that you were supposed to put on your books. So one of them was advertising Dr. Pepper, and the other one was advertising the Army. I didn't understand why. I am probably as anal as you get about taking care of things. So I didn't understand why they want me to spoil the beautiful cover of these books with a Dr. Pepper cover or an Army cover. I did not understand it. So I basically didn't put them on. I didn't understand that that you had to. I didn't understand that it wasn't coming my way as a command. It was more like, oh, cover them with these nice covers, right? I thought the actual book cover was nicer than that. So I said no. Well, so they called my host family, telling them that I had absolutely refused to follow the school instructions, and that I would not be welcome to come back until I put those covers on those books. That those books belonged to the school, and so I was trying to ask the families if I could put any other kind of paper, like it could be Christmas wrapping for all I care, something else other than Dr. Pepper or the Army on the books, but I didn't really know how to get this across. And eventually, but the surprise to me was that how important it is that you understand the context of the school, of Dr. Pepper and the Army, and all of this, I didn't have a context at all for it. So I broke the rules. I got in trouble. My poor host family got in trouble. They covered the books and sent me home the next day. It sent me to school the next day regardless. But eventually, we ended up putting different paper on the book. That's the moral of the story. That once we all understood each other, I was able to make a different choice for this book covers, because as long as they were covered, that's what mattered. They were just giving us those for free in case we wanted them. But that was my welcome to the American school system. And it was shocking. So I want to share that with you because sometimes students are feeling stressed and for many different reasons. So that was my reason. I didn't really understand what people wanted me to do, and I wanted to do the right thing. So that was my story with the books. What I would like for you to do for about 2 minutes at the most is turn to someone near you, and if there's a person that is alone near your team, bring them over and learn something personal about them. First, their name, what they do, and something personal that it's quick so they can remember you, recall you the next time they see you. And then when I raise my hand, we'll come back together and keep going with a session. Clear? Thank you. So go ahead. Thank you so much. So I hope that you made a new friend. And the next time you see him walking down the hall, that you can call him by name. So what are we going to do today here together? So our goal is really to create a commitment to family engagement as a core strategy for student learning and school improvement, student achievement. It's finding exactly and solving together what family engagement is. And I will share the things that I have done, like developing academic parent-teacher teams and other things that I have learned through that journey. So this is a graphic that I use every time I present. This is an average student, age 5 to age 18. This represents 6 hours of instruction, 180 days per year. That is 12% of a child's year. Then we are assuming the child sleeps around 8 hours a night, 365 days a year. And everything else, weekends, summer, Christmas, spring break, I said Saturday, Sundays, all of that is included in this 55%. This is why I am in this field of family engagement. That exactly. So I want you to think about this and what kind of reaction do you have to this slide? What's your first thought? This is a year in a child's life, right? And another way of thinking about it. What are some of your first reactions and thoughts? They don't learn enough, or it doesn't seem to be enough in school time. That's one reaction you could have. There is a lot of influence outside of the school. That's a great thought. What else? Yes. Yeah. The focusing on family engagement is critical based on that breakdown of a child's time. The other thing I wanted to bring up is this 12%. What does it include? What's not included in there? If I were to be really exact, I would probably have to discount a couple of other things that we do with the 180 days of school that are not necessarily instruction. What would that be? Lunch, testing, riding the bus back and forth to school, study hall, chatter, assemblies, absences, tardiness, sickness. So there's a whole bunch of possible things that lower that 12%. If you look at the literature, it actually says 7%. Only 7% of a child's time is dedicated to in the classroom learning from their teacher or teachers. So for that reason, I wanted to frame our conversation and the importance of family engagement on this. I wanted to give you a why, right? This is why we do it. Because how we connect and build relationships and professionalize the family engagement field, the more influence we can have on a student's learning outside of the school. So that's really, really important. And it really is about professionalizing our family engagement efforts and the impact that has on families and student learning in the home. This is a conversation. So yes, I came to present, but I want you to feel like you can raise your hand anytime you have a question. Anything that you have to add to this is really important. So please make sure that if you are moved to participate, please do so. In 2002, we were still not so sure. Everybody had that feeling. Family engagement is critical, especially the slide that I just showed you. That all that takes is a calculator. You just calculate the days, the minutes, the hours, and you can get that slide yourself. So you don't have to do a research study for that. You just use the calculator and you got it, right? But even with that, we had not combed through the research enough to know the benefits, the direct benefits of effective family engagement. And Henderson and Mapp in 2002 did a meta-analysis of all the research that's out there in family engagement. And from that, they published a study called A New Wave of Evidence. And basically, it was a huge 300-page paper that arrived at this fact. So that's really when in family engagement we had good research to hang on to and to part from moving forward. So the first thing, I was a classroom teacher. I taught 7th grade for many years. I then became a school administrator, school principal. From that, I became a director of family and community engagement at the district level. During the time I was a teacher, I also taught family classes. So after school, so that I could have more shopping money, I would teach from 6 to 8, 4 nights a week. What I learned teaching families was really what set in motion that I dedicate my life to the field of family engagement. I learned so much about them that coupled with my knowledge of research and my knowledge of leadership and my knowledge of instruction in the classroom, all of that together helped me focus on this, because I felt that there were a lot of people working on improving instruction and learning in the classroom, but almost no one dedicated to improving the way families support learning in the home. So I felt that that's where I could make the biggest difference. So now I had to learn this because unfortunately I was one of those first people. I also wanted to say, the job of Director of Family and Community Engagement in districts did not exist. So how do you apply for a job that's never been had and a job that there is no job description for? But this is what I wanted to do. So I took our superintendent out for wine. That's what you do. And after 2 glasses, she said yes. So it didn't even take that long. But I explained to her all the different things I wanted to do and how I wanted to change the district and what we did with families. And I think she heard my passion and my love for this field and said, yes, I got the job. I just had to write the job description because they didn't have one. And if I wrote the job description, she will allow other people to hear me out and help me with what I wanted to do. And so I will always be grateful to our superintendent. Charlotte Boyle is her name. She's still alive. But as I started this work, I realized that there was really very little to go on. There was a lot of learning and very little to learn from. So I had to start sort of backtracking, actually. And first I needed to tell the difference between what are social services and what is family engagement. Because up to that point, everything was in the same basket. If you invited the food bank to come to the school and everybody took home different things, clothing or food, that was called family engagement. If the dentist came over and spent 2 days in the district, that was called family engagement. If we had parent conferences, that was called family engagement. So we didn't have a way to differentiate what was what. And so that was part of the learning that needed to take place. So as you well know, because you're actually experts in this area, everybody that works with special education children know a lot about social services. So this, if it's not as good as you like it, just ignore it. But this is the idea of social services, is to link home, school, and community to eliminate barriers for students' well-being, the whole child, right? And it's making those critical connections between those services and the families and the school. Family engagement is different. Family engagement is the partnership between parents and teachers to drive student learning and achievement. Nothing else. That's family engagement. It's a collaboration, and it's purely for the purpose of learning and achievement, doing well, growth. And the reason why we invite families into our schools when it comes to family engagement, the whole purpose of that is so that we can help support parents in creating a rich and stimulating home learning environment. It's about increasing equity. It's about helping more families have the information, the strategies, the know-how to bring learning into everyday life at home, just like you do with your own children. See, what happens is that some of us are really good at it, but why do you think that a lot of teachers are really good at parenting like this? What might be some of those reasons that it comes? How many of you have kids? How many of these kids have completely dropped out of school and been just terrible? Raise your hand if your child is one of those. See, none of you. Because you really, really know how. You really know how to parent to support classroom learning. You know how to parent to develop language. You know how to parent to create routines and all of the great things that children need. Some parents have not had the level of training you have had. Some of the parents did not necessarily grow up or have the experiences with education that you have. So we have to share it with them. So that's the purpose of family engagement in school. Any questions? Any thoughts? Yes.
It's very frustrating. I mean, I was a special ed teacher for 9 years, and I've been superintendent for 14. And we try not to use it as excuse, but there is a level of apathy that I've not seen. I mean, it's worse than it's ever been, and it's very frustrating. We send out surveys, we do incentives, we feed people. You can't get people to come out, at least not the people that need to. I mean, it's pretty sad, and it's a national thing. I mean, when you have to eat with your family night, and that becomes a special night that they advertise on TV, or TV turn-off night once a year. I mean, it's just, there is a disconnect. I mean, and that, you hear all of these things about school shootings. There's really two things that you need to do. You need to have the community needs to look out for each other like they used to. And when those warning signs come up, they need to be there to report that. And families need to know what their children are doing. And those are the two things that we don't see happening. And it's frustrating because we've tried so many things to get people involved.
Yeah, so I really appreciate Scott's point of view, which is things have really changed. It's a struggle to get families in, and it's a struggle to preserve some of the old-fashioned engagement that used to occur. And all of that's true, but life has gotten so complicated for everyone that we have to be absolutely thinking outside the box to really not only get families to come in, but create a whole new way of how we've been doing. So hopefully some of the ideas that I'm going to share will help support what you're thinking. But I want you to keep this purpose of family engagement as your template for thinking, for what we're going to think and do ahead of this. One of the things that once I started being able to sort through all the things that we were doing in our district under the guise of family engagement, but there were really other things that had nothing to do with improving student learning. If we had a fall festival, we called it family engagement. We were just incredibly grateful that there were 300 families that showed up to that. But is the student achievement going to go up with that? No, right? That's just, we have to call it what it is. Let's all have fun together. That's what it is, right? So I think just sorting through things and labeling things for what they are was really important in this growth process. So here is one of the challenges that have been identified by teachers themselves. The MetLife survey of 2009, and some of you might be very aware of this survey. This survey gave us a glimpse of some of the problems that are happening. Teachers, and this is a survey that many hundreds of thousands of teachers take across the United States. They basically said, at no point in my teacher training program did I get trained on how to engage families. Administrators receive administrator certificates, principalships, superintendentships, without really understanding and knowing how to support family engagement in their districts and in their schools. It's a very brief workshop, or it's something in passing, but not necessarily a big part of their coursework. And that's one thing that you're going to have no matter where in the United States you are. That is that every child comes with a family that you're going to have to deal with until they leave your school. So we have to really think of how we become more professional in this area, so that we can respond better. The other thing that teachers let us know through this survey is that they felt that parents were not supporting them, and that was really hard as a teacher. That was one of the toughest things to deal with, is their perception of lack of parent support, like part of what Scott was mentioning. That's their most pressing challenge. And the other thing that they also reported was that they know that if families were engaged, their student learning and achievement would be higher. They knew that. So those were the three important areas that were reported in this MetLife teacher survey of 2009. It was huge. It really gave us a rich perspective on what educators were feeling. So do some of this ring a bell for you? Yeah. How many of you have taken a semester class on family engagement? That's what I thought. And almost nowhere are these courses available. If you come to a conference, maybe you can sort of learn a little bit, but not necessarily. It's not part of preparing you to be a teacher or an administrator. It's tough. So for that reason, it's very easy to have perceptions, opinions about families, and making that part of your teaching experience, which sometimes it's positive and sometimes not so much. Depends on what you know. So I want you to take a few minutes, and I want you to, with people around you, I want you to examine some of those assumptions that we make about families in our school community. What are some of the assumptions that are made often about families that sometimes get in the way? Some assumptions are good and some are not so good, right? So if you don't mind, because I really want to bring this to the forefront so that we can deal with them a little bit. So if you don't mind, just for and I know that some of you are parents, so that's really good because you can pitch in on this. So for about 2 or 3 minutes, we're going to discuss, and I want to tell you, I have been in the teacher lounge of schools for years. So I've been part of those conversations. I have been, like I said, I was a school administrator, so I've been part of that also. And I've spent a lot of time around families, so I know a little bit about the feelings. So if we could discuss this and be open and transparent about it, that would be excellent. So for the next 3 minutes, we're going to do that. And then, again, I'll raise my hand and I will ask you to share out some of those assumptions that we have made. Go for it.
Remind you that when you stand in front of the screen, when the film, they won't be listening.
So thank you for talking about these things. I am really excited to hear some of the conversations and some of the assumptions that sometimes we spread around in our schools and sometimes make difficult situations worse, right? So what would be some of those assumptions? I was part of the big group in the corner there, and we had some awesome conversations, knowing that a couple of these people they came here as parents, representing parents. So what are some of the conversations? And I want any of you to jump in and help us out. What were some of the things? Yes.
So we were saying that the assumption of the school could be that the families weren't interested. And in fact, maybe they were, just whatever was that particular event was didn't interest them. Maybe there was something else that they would be interested in.
Is that something
finding
that
the right thing that would get them engaged?
Is that something that anyone else thought about, that some of the events might not necessarily feel important to all families?
Or even some families might be working other shifts, like I do. I work in a hospital. I work 3 to 11. I can't make those events, you know, and I have nobody to take my kids, but people assume because I'm not there. But really, we work different shifts.
Sure,
7 days a week.
sure. Thank you for that. What might be something else for you?
This might be a little backwards, but I didn't want to go because my kid was a struggler and he wasn't participating, and it was never a happy place to be. So it was only ever negative information about my son. And, I can see that if your son or daughter was excelling and the captain of the football team, how you'd die to get that feedback. But that wasn't a place. I mean, my son wasn't doing any of that stuff.
Right.
He wasn't doing hat day or pajama day and all those days that we discussed in our group that are uncomfortable, but he wasn't participating. And as a mother in the education field, I couldn't get him to participate. And it just wasn't a happy place to go. I mean, maybe looking back, my son's now in college. I made him go. I did have that influence. But yeah, it was just such an awful place to go. I mean, just maybe subconsciously I thought, oh, who needs to hear how poorly he's doing again?
Thank you so much for that. Who else had other assumptions that are commonly shared in like in the teachers' lounge? I love that. Yes.
Why bother? It won't be followed through with. I hear that one a lot. I'm not going to do all this work, and then they're not going to do it at home anyhow.
Right. They're not, regardless of how far we stretch to provide services, they are not going to do those things. Yeah, I think a lot of teachers feel that way. What's something else? There is a microphone coming your way so that we can all hear you well.
We heard in another session this morning about poverty, not to make the assumption that low-income families don't care or don't value education, because I hear that sometimes, well, the family, they just don't value education. But then we were talking just now that I don't think you can say a whole population does value education or doesn't, because there are a lot of different families within every population. For example, we were just talking about a student that I met on yesterday who is not falling in the low income category, I guess, and I believe that family doesn't value education because they're too busy with all of their extracurricular activities to get homework done or to read in the evening or anything that we ask them to do. So I guess that is an assumption that we often say about low income, but it goes both ways.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing. Do you have one more comment?
I was just going to say that we assume that parents are more reactive versus proactive.
Yeah, that was a good comment. Is that in many instances parents react rather than being proactive, being in constant communication with the teacher or reaching out to find out how their student is doing. I just want you to know that it takes a certain kind of experience and know-how to behave that way. It's my parents. Let me tell you this: my mom was a judge and my dad was a college professor, and they didn't behave that way either. So it's not necessarily. It's more of a cultural thing, right? For example, let me just tell you this. In Venezuela, where I am from, there is no family engagement. There isn't any of these kinds of things. It is the absolute assumption that every child will go to college. It's a social assumption. If you don't go to college, it's because your family probably works in a farm, and that's what they're going to do, so that's what they do out of high school. But it is an assumption. There are countries on this earth where when it is time to test the kids for college entrance exams, the day does not start until 10 o'clock. So no one else is allowed to be on the roads until 10 a.m. so that all children can get to their testing centers in time. There are other countries in the world where education is not just it's not a privilege, right? It's what the society is built around. We just have, for some reason, we have gotten used to the fact that we have the luxury to make education a luxury for some reason. So it's different, and parents come from other countries sometimes, and they have a whole different background and framework for this. So they don't even understand why the school will have a potluck to have you there. Like, to me, that was like, seriously? Wouldn't you rather be with your own family? Those families would rather be with their own families. So it's a very, you have to look at it from very different perspective. And then on top of that, you want parents to be making decisions about curriculum? Really? What am I supposed to know about curriculum? You're the one who went to college to be an educator. You can ask me questions, but to assume that any parent will have that level of insight into standards and teaching and learning and assessment is sometimes not realistic. So, and it's not necessarily you making those decisions, but somehow these assumptions are being made that don't always pan out. So I was telling my earlier group today that my little claim to fame is that I developed a model of family engagement called academic parent-teacher teams. And academic parent-teacher teams is a model that replaces or updates parent conferences, the old-fashioned parent conferences, because that is already built into teachers' contracts, that time, right? So my idea was, how do we take that time, the time that it takes us to prepare for, and then meet individually with families for 15 or 20 minutes twice a year? That's a lot of time. That's about 20 hours, to be exact. Somewhere around there, by the time you prepare for fall parent conferences, and then have all those individual conferences, and by the time you prepare and hold spring conferences and have all those individual conferences, it's about 20 hours. Depending on, I used to have 28 students in my class. That's a lot of families. So it was, I felt that there has to be a system, and that it had to be better than parent conferences, because it's too short. So here is the way the model works. My idea was that, again, knowing about instruction and what works, right? I try to build all of those things like data-driven instruction and professional learning communities, SMART goals, I do, we do, you do, and many other strategies that are built into this model. And I will show you what that looks like in just a minute. But so it's made up of team meetings. So we have 3 team meetings. And a team meeting, a classroom teacher invites all of his or her families for an hour and 15 minutes to basically a workshop. It's facilitated by the classroom teacher. In some high schools, it's facilitated by a counselor, an advisor, a teacher. It could be other people as well. And I will break this down for you, these team meetings. But that you will have 3 of those. And then in the late fall, you have an individual session that is basically a follow-up to this team meeting. And you have a chance to get to know the families even more personally. You have another team meeting in the winter and another team meeting in the spring. So it's always like that. Every quarter, the parents in a classroom and the teacher will come together. Here it's what it looks like. And this is basically, it's very structured. It always looks the same. And fidelity to the model means that you're going to follow that structure. Okay, so every meeting looks the same. First, there's a team building activity. The important thing, part of the philosophy behind academic parent-teacher teams, is to create a community of learners in each classroom, for parents to know each other, to support each other, to feel connected and close to one another, to offer support and to ask for support. That's really important. That, to me, was missing in our schools. The next thing is, if I am a parent, let's take, for instance, 3rd grade. If I'm a parent in 3rd grade, what do I need to know to support my child academically? What are the must-knows of 3rd grade? You have to be able to do this in order to be ready for 4th grade. What do you think that is? What do I have to do? What does a 3rd grader have to do well to be prepared for the 4th grade? You have to know your multiplication facts from 0 to 10, I think, inside and out, like fluently, right? That's one thing. They have to know that. And how about in language arts? What do kids have to know and be able to do? Yes.
Read to learn instead of learn to read.
Yes, they have to read with fluency and they have to understand what they are reading. So if I am a parent in 3rd grade and the teacher says, all right, parents, this year our priorities are multiplication facts from 0 to 10, and they have to know them inside and out. And they also have to read fast and accurately and understand everything they read. That's our purpose this year. As a parent, I'm like, oh, I get it. I can handle that. But when you throw standards at parents, that makes no sense. They are not really in education. That's not for parents. Or, sometimes the schools really want parents to understand all the assessments. And some parents want to know those things, but most parents really just want to know, how can I help? What are the priorities? And show me how I should do that. What does that look like, right? So that's what we call foundational grade level skills. So if I'm working with a group of 3rd grade teachers, we're going to focus on the first meeting, we're going to focus on a specific skill and teach that and practice that. The next time we have a team meeting, it could be a continuation of that same skill or add another skill. We always have, in elementary school, we always have a math and a language arts. Okay? And it's a quick lesson, and it's fun, and it's practical. It should help parents understand how to bring this into everyday life, how it plugs into the real world. That's really important. Then, let's say the first meeting we're dealing with multiplication facts. So what the teacher would have done prior to this meeting is test all the children on their multiplication facts from 0 to 10. Maybe give them a test and give them 5 minutes, right? So when the parents come in for their first meeting and the skill is multiplication facts, they have an assessment that they're going to look at, and they have a data graph. So as a teacher, I plot all of the results of the kids' multiplication fact assessment, and I put it in a bar graph. I also number the children with a random number that only the parent knows, so that I give this secret number to the parents, and they are able to find their child in that bar graph. Okay? We can discuss what happens when there are parents who have special needs children and might not necessarily fit that mold, right? And everybody is different, and we can target individual circumstances to meet those. But it's really important that parents have a knowledge of, this is where my child is. The data graph then is a bar graph with all the children, and then here would be 100 problems, right? There's a horizontal line that is lower, and that tells the parents what's the benchmark at the moment of that meeting. So if we're having a meeting in October, what's the expectation? How many problems should children be able to do out of this 100 in October if they are 3rd graders? And then at the very top of the graph is another bar that tells them what the end of the year benchmark. The children should be able to do 100 problems correctly in 5 minutes. So they're working for that, right? But they have a clear picture of what the expectation is. After that, the teacher uses the I do, we do, you do instructional strategy and models 2 activities with the families. Then they do the we do, where the teacher plays the game against the whole room of families. It's guided practice. And then the you do is we give parents the activities and they practice together, and the teacher walks around and makes sure that everybody's having fun, that they get the games, they understand how to do this. And the parents are also realizing that these are just examples of activities that they're going to take home, but how else can they practice this when these activities get old in 3 or 4 weeks, right? What else do they go to? And the last thing in the APTT model is setting a SMART goal. Now parents know the skill they're going to work on. They know where their child is with a data graph. They know what it's going to take and how to do that practice at home. Now they set a SMART goal. The teacher will facilitate or model how to set a SMART goal. Parents set a SMART goal, and everybody goes home. The next team meeting, now you will have a pre and a post data graph. So every child has a pre and a post score so that parents can see what they were able to do with their practice at home. So now the growth is obvious. And in some instances, the growth is unbelievable, because the parents get to work, because now they know exactly what's expected. So that is a team meeting. That's an APTT team meeting. I'm going to let you chat for just a few minutes with with your groups, and because you might have questions about how this works in schools or districts. 3 minutes. And come up with a question that you might want to ask when we come back. Okay, so I know that this is a big leap and a big change from our customary parent conference, right? But that's the whole point. Parent conferences have not changed in 80 years, and they are in desperate need of an overhaul because parents are not getting enough, and neither are teachers. When I was a teacher, parent conferences were a big headache. No one expected anything out of parent conferences. It was a huge investment in time and effort. And no one even asked if they went well. You know what I mean? It was just something you did, just like get out and get into your car and go home after school. It was like nothing out of the ordinary, even though it was an extraordinary opportunity to connect and work with families. So yes, this is different. And it looks different in a preschool setting, in an elementary setting, in a middle school setting, and a high school setting. In the high school, it might not be math facts and fluency and comprehension. In the high school, it might be more social emotional development, like assignment completion. How do we monitor that? How do I work with parents to monitor something like that? It could be leadership skills. So that, it could be communication skills so that children might be able to get a summer internship and possibly have an advantage going into college. Or it could be so many different things in the high school. But the framework is identical. It doesn't change. It's just what you choose to focus on that changes. But it's still the same. You still need data, you still need activities, you still need an assessment of some sort so that we are all going from the same place. So what else, what was another question about this model compared to what you are more used to?
How do you get into that
How do you get them to that initial meeting? That is really important. Do your parents go to your parent conferences?
About 50 to 60% do.
That's not bad. That's 50 to 60% of families that do go. So that's a really great start. So one of the things that we do in working with families is figure out what are some priority children and how do we establish genuine relationships with those families rather than just sending them a reminder and a flyer and just cross our fingers that they come. What are genuine, legitimate ways to connect with those families? And we're going to touch on that a little bit more. But that's part of what we do as we work with schools is really empower teachers about their relationships with families. If I'm not connected with you, I'm going to ignore your flyer, I'm going to ignore your phone call, I'm going to ignore your calls because you're probably asking me to come to an event that has nothing to do with my child's achievement because that's what you've been inviting me to do so far. It hasn't worked for me. It's not a priority for me. I'm too busy to be going to potlucks. I do that at church, and it's wonderful. I just don't need to do that at school too. So there are all kinds of shifts that I want you to know that I'm not saying that fun events are not important, but what I am saying is don't confuse that with family engagement. Okay? Family engagement is what you do to improve the home learning environment. And in order for parents and teachers to really, truly be a support to each other, they have to understand each other. They have to know each other. They have to be connected. They have to have a relationship. So if we don't do that, then we have a more difficult time getting those parents in. So that's one thing. Anything else that is, you're like, oh my gosh, this sounds too difficult. Does it? Or not really? Teachers absolutely love it because in 1 hour and 15 minutes, you have shared, educated, and learned from the whole classroom in one easy 75 minutes, as opposed to regular conferences where you meet individually and do it again and again and again and again. It's not very efficient.
I find that schools are steeped in tradition.
Oh, yes.
And I don't see this flying in a lot of schools. They're steeped in very deep tradition. They don't want to change. Anything new is scary. And that's been my biggest barrier as a parent.
Yeah.
Even bringing up something that I know will be effective, it's like they shut the door right in my face. So how do you go through that barrier of steeped in tradition?
You know, I appreciate that. But I do think that educators want change, if you know what I'm saying. I think educators are willing, but there is very little professional development and coaching in the area of family engagement. Like we took a poll earlier and nobody had been trained or educated in family engagement. So we can't really change the culture or want something more effective and more efficient if we don't really know about it. So that is a challenge. So one of the things that you might be able to do is, for example, in your school districts, send the parent and the director of curriculum and instruction or the director of special education and send them to the National Family and Community Engagement Conference so they can learn what is best practices. What does that look like in other school districts? I was shocked, but when I finished my research in very, very early 2011, and I had 2 years worth of data on academic parent-teacher teams, I was stunned that people were hungry for something better than traditional parent conferences. we are all in schools and school districts, we are all, I hate to say it like this, under the gun, right? To perform, to do better. But we are not tapping into that 55% that you saw on that graphic at the beginning of this workshop. We are not necessarily learning how to partner with families to do better. And sometimes we have the information, sometimes we don't, but we have to seek out that information. So I was shocked. Just look at this. In the last 7 years, there are over 600 schools. I would probably say around 700 schools in the United States doing APTT. And it was just me coming up with it. I mean, it's not like it's, anyone is behind it. There is no big company behind it or anything. It's just, and that's amazing to me. There are states like Georgia, Wisconsin, New Mexico, Utah, that are actually doing APTT at the state level. So they are really working to scale it up in the best possible way from the state, right? There are counties in Florida and Georgia and many other places where the whole county is an APTT county. So people are learning to do it. It doesn't happen overnight. And believe me, when teachers learn about this, they are not all raising the flag, let's go, do it now, right? We start with the teachers that are risk takers, that want to take the first steps. We measure those outcomes, and then we present them to the district, and more people want to do it because you have evidence, you have data that it works better than not doing it. So I think it's a process. There's no quick and easy answer, but it happens faster than you think. Yes?
Well, one of the things that I really liked about it was it kind of levels the playing field a little bit for parents, because we were talking about how there's always those one or two parents who are like the overachiever parents that do everything in the school, and they intimidate the other parents. So nobody else wants to be involved because this parent's got it under, is doing everything. So like potlucks and activities don't cut it for the parents who are intimidated by them.
No.
So this is nice because it levels that playing field a little bit and lets every parent know that they can contribute and be part of their child's day.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things, thank you for saying that, and a little bit ago, one of the things that happens when willing and ready teachers pilot this in your schools and your school districts is that those teachers tend to be, at the same time, those teachers that are less afraid of reaching out to parents, that feel more comfortable. Every principal has their 10 teachers out of 30 that are a little bit more extroverted, perhaps, that don't mind calling parents and saying, hey, I need to meet with you for 20 minutes. Do you mind coming in? That are more personal and that do naturally build relationships with parents without necessarily having it set up for them. They just know these things. When I go to schools, we work with schools, like I said, in many states and in many districts, urban or outside of cities, and all kinds of different demographics, especially Title I. We have never worked with a school that is not Title I. We would and would love to, but that's not normally who spends their Title I money on this, right? Because they have no Title I money. But one of the things that is clear when you're walking down the halls to go see some APTT meetings is that there are teachers whose classrooms are packed with parents, right? And they're having fun and they know everybody by name and all of that. and then you might go into a classroom where there might be 2 or 3 parents, and that teacher is not having an easy time. Why? Because they didn't feel comfortable reaching out to the families personally. They didn't feel comfortable. It's not coming easy to them, is what I'm trying to say. So that teacher needs more support and a little bit more time. But they will come around because parents will do the right thing when they know exactly what that is and support that teacher. And it's a growth process for everybody together. So we're having a really great time spreading this around, working with schools and districts. And normally our goal is to build the capacity, the internal capacity. So by the time we're done working with you, you will have experts at the district level and experts at the school level. Yes?
So what do you do when, like the first team meeting, when a lot of the parents want to make it an individual conference? Like, do you run into that? Like after your whole 75-minute thing's done as a group, do they try to turn it into individual conferences? Or?
Yes. So the tendency is,
so then you're there
this is supposed to be about my kid. And the teacher says, but we are going to have an individual time. Remember, that's why the individual time is second, and it coincides often with your first parent conference. So that you can tell parents, we will be having our individual time. And just know, if you need to talk to me tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, just call me. I'm right here. This is so that we can create a team here. But I am not going to stop individually supporting you. So I think reassuring parents is also...
Good with that then? Like,
absolutely. And parents love APTT because in many communities, parents learn from other parents a lot. So when they're sitting in a round table and doing activities and chatting and talking to other parents, it's a very positive experience that it's needed. When they are alone with a teacher and feel somewhat intimidated, they don't necessarily have the right questions or know enough to explore learning themes that they are not familiar with. So building a classroom community of learners is powerful, okay?
I was just going to add that at our school, in our middle school, we do that. They get together and they meet with all of the parents, and in order to keep the parents from wanting to focus just on them and their child, they kind of have a schedule, and the principal will come on and say, okay, and they have something else for them to do to keep them moving. Because if you don't, that's what ends up happening. It becomes individual conferences and there'll be one parent that just takes over. So we don't have that. She'll get on and say, okay, it's time to do this. They kind of prepare themselves for that, so they can't have the time to do that.
Yes. So we work really hard. We work really hard to make every aspect of the APTT meetings very structured, including the PowerPoint presentation. Teachers go over the rules. You know, this is a team. It's about all of our children right now. We just and the purpose is stressed profoundly. So here is if teachers don't have opportunities to build relationship with families, it's really difficult to have successful outreach, which is what Scott was asking at first. It is the relationships that help parents be responsive to the teachers because they trust those teachers. They have a connection. They have a relationship. In some instances, they live in communities where they live next door or go to coffee on Wednesday afternoon or go to church together or something, right? There are communities where parents and teachers know each other. So it is really important. The success of APTT is lies on this concept of relationships. Some teachers go and do a home visit for 3 or 4 or 5 students in their class, because those are families that need a very specific type of approach. And after they have established that relationship, then the parents are coming to their APTT meetings. It doesn't have to be that you do home visits for every single family, especially if the family is already very engaged, but they might be particular students where building the relationship with their families is critical. And the teachers are know and understand that and do that. So here's what I've learned. Not me, but our whole team has learned, and this goes back to Scott's initial questions that is so important. For this effective outreach is when it's time for APTT meetings are approaching, and the teachers are sending the reminders and everything else to the families, right? And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. And we have to really take a step back and think about how do we redesign other school events, such as open house or meet the teacher or events that are part of the school environment, no matter what, so that they are truly, genuinely designed to create strong connections between parents and teachers. Because the way they are designed now, they're not designed for that. They are not designed for that. They're designed to just say hi and have very superficial conversations, but not necessarily to build strong connections. So that regular positive communication both ways continues. So that when I reach out to you and remind you through an app or a phone call, or you're picking up your child, hey, don't forget on Thursday is our APTT meeting. And the parents say, I have it on my calendar, I'll be here. Absolutely, I won't let you down. We are connected, we know each other. So that's going to be really important. So how to make some of your important family engagement events successful, because they are about learning and they are about improving the home learning environment, without giving teachers opportunities to build relationship with families, and without that ongoing communication that is built from those connections. That makes outreach really difficult. Okay? I am going to show you this video because it's all about relationships, and I want you to tell me what you think.
Well, immediately after the home visit, I was then invited to a back to school night they were having in Stanton. They gave me the little flyer. I was like, well, you know, we're having a back to school night. It's from this time and this time. Bring the kids, you know, like a meet and greet the teachers and everyone that was going to be there. But one thing I can say about, you know, Stanton period is that it is constant communication, something I never had, something I completely enjoy. And it's not just negative communication, it's constant positive communication. I can be here at home, at work, anywhere, and one of my teachers would send me a text. Or I used to love it, Miss Lucas would send pictures. Take pictures of them doing classwork, and you'll see, look how my Tanae, well, I call her Bird. The school calls her Bird, which I love because it's like a community. They adopted her nickname. So she would send me a text like, look at Bird, she's having a wonderful day today, and she's doing good. But in saying that, that allowed me to hear, it put a trust. I put a trust in Miss Lucas for doing that. So no matter what she said, how she had to say it, what the information is, it made it easier for me to receive it from her. Because she had built this communication, this trust that I never had. You know, so I tell people now, friendship. You know what I'm saying? We're not friends to talk every single day, but she's a person that I will always hold in a high regard. She will always have my respect. I really respect Miss Lucas, and I value her so much because not just her, but all the teachers, but like she was the first one to really extend herself to me. And I would get the text. And then one day, Tanae had a bad day. And she called me, and I was expecting to hear something good. Oh, you know, she got good on her test, so she did read. And she was like, well, we had a bit of an issue today. I'm like, for real? What happened? Well, you know, Tanae did X, Y, and Z. And I didn't get defensive. I didn't get, well, what do you do? Or what did I actually sat back and I listened and I received the information. You know, and I processed the information. For me, that was something different because at that point in time, I felt it like, why am I not getting mad? Because normally when you call me on the phone and you telling me something about my child did this, I'm naturally on the defense like, well, what did you do to make my child do this? Or who was messing with her in class because my baby's a good baby. But in this time it was different. And I don't know if it's because of the positive, you know, feedback she gives me every day, the friendship we brought. It just made, when she was telling me what was going on, I took a breath, I stopped and I listened. You know, and then I was like, we actually got to a page where we worked together. I said, well, you know what, since she's having a bad day, you know, can you put her on the phone? Mm-hmm. You know, and I spoke with her on the phone and I let her know that me and Miss Lucas are working together. We are a team, you know, and if she asks you to do something, you need to treat it as if mommy is asking you to do something. So if she asks you to sit down, you need to sit down. And there was no more problems with Tanae.
Isn't that awesome? It really gives you an insight into a parent's perspective when a teacher communicates with a parent positively for positive reasons, unexpectedly. I hope she was exaggerating that Miss Lucas will text her every day, because no one has enough time for that. But even if it was once a week or once every 2 weeks, that would still be amazing. That would be unexpected and really, truly a huge welcome message from the parents. Being told positive things regularly is huge. I love that she explains how she always expected good news because Bird was a good kid, right? But the minute she wasn't a good kid this particular day, she was able to receive the information in a way that that allowed her to partner with the teacher and have the right approach. So that was a huge deal. If that regular communication occurs, then outreach to parents for something as important as an APTT meeting, for example, which determines what parents are going to be working on for the next 8 weeks, basically, 6 to 8 weeks. That's huge. That's really important. They will probably respond positively because they have that connection with you. So that's, I just wanted to give you that. That's what we have learned. That's what we know, that relationships are everything, and it will help any kind of important family engagement initiative that is focused on student learning. It will help that initiative be impactful because the relationships are there. I really, really appreciate that you chose this session, and I hope that I was able to give you something to think about when it comes to family engagement. This is my phone number and this is my email address. If you have any questions, if you have anything, if you think that your school district is ready for APTT, give us a call. We'll come and do professional development. We'll come and do coaching. We'll help your teachers feel prepared for APTT meetings. And in time, we will train your own coaches and your own trainers so that you have this for your district. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.